Hello, and welcome to the Top 5 Landscape Lighting Tips and Trends webinar hosted by WAC Landscape Lighting. My name is Kim Lux, and I am an assistant editor with Lawn and Landscape Magazine. I will be moderating today's discussion. Now, a few housekeeping notes before we get started. During the webinar, please feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A box. We will take some time toward the end to answer these. Also, this webinar is being recorded and all registered attendees will receive a link to it in the next few days. It will also be up on the Lawn and Landscape website. Now, let's introduce today's speakers. We have Todd Gores, Director of Sales with WAC Landscape Lighting, Chuck Hoover, the Western Regional Manager with WAC, Kyle Robinson, Landscape Sales and Design with Ritchie's Landscape Management, and Nick Ritchie, Landscape Sales Design Rep, also with RLM. Let's start off with our first question. How have LED technologies revolutionized the landscape lighting industry? Todd, let's start with you.
Okay, Kim, before I start with the answer or my comments on this question, I just wanted to say thank you for helping put this together. We appreciate that very much. For those on the call today, most people, I would assume, are aware of Lawn and Landscape, trade publication. But if you're not, it's something I think you should definitely look into subscribing to. It's got some great content, and it is one of the, I would call it, industry staples out there. So great trade publication to get. And just real quick, we're not going to be talking a lot about WAC products specifically on this webinar today, but I just wanted to let everybody know that's on the call. We will be at the GIE show. I think now it's called the Hardscape Expo possibly, but for me, it'll always be known as the GIE show. But they're in Louisville, Kentucky next month. So if you've been to it, you know it's a fantastic show. I would call it the leading show or the best show that our industry has. There'll be plenty of landscape lighting manufacturers there. Obviously, WAC Landscape Lighting will be there. But if you can get to it, it's just a phenomenal show to go to. Jumping into the question, back Kim, to your question about LED technologies and how they've changed. I'd like to start off. It's interesting because not so long ago, I'll call it 15 years. Again, you could say that's a long time, but it really, in the big scheme of things, is not. We were still dealing with, and I was traveling around the country talking to contractor groups about converting their landscape lighting systems from halogen to LED, and that was kind of the focus of the seminar. And that wasn't that long ago. And we had contractors putting in halogen systems where you had to be very careful. You had a 1-volt window to maintain fixtures at. Generally, well accepted range was 10.8 to 11.8, and you were trying to get every fixture in that range, and it was very, very difficult. You had a lot more math to consider on the front end. You had a lot more wire going into the ground, higher wattage transformers were being used. And so this LED technology that's come about in our industry really has revolutionized the whole way that these landscape lighting systems are being installed. I would say back 15 years ago, it might have been 50-50 as far as percentages on how many people were putting in LED systems versus halogen systems. And today, I mean, I would guess that we've got easily over 95% of the folks putting in landscape lighting systems are using an LED product. So that's a big thing right there. One of the biggest advantages, that we have is this window. Most of the companies out there that I'm familiar with, you have a range of 9 volts to 15 volts to have your products work within, and they'll have the same light output, whether they're at 9 volts or all the way to 15 volts. So very forgiving. We had back when halogen was being used, I mean, there was a term called daisy chain, which was like an evil word, and nobody would have that wiring method. But today, there are many systems are going in with the daisy chain method, and it's because you can do it now. You 9 to 15 volts is a very wide window, and you have less wires being run and put in the ground and run back to the transformer when you have this large window to work within. So, you know, just obviously laying the system out is much more forgiving, much easier, where there's not as much work on the front end with the system. And it's allowed, I think, more folks to get into the landscape lighting industry. With that, I'll pass it over to Chuck to see what comments he'd like to add.
Well, just thanks, Todd. I mean, just to come off what you're stating there, alongside with that, I've seen a lot of design flexibility come from that. And initially with LEDs over halogen systems, in particular halogen lamps themselves, LEDs can be aligned in different arrays or grouped together. So you can create pinpoint effects. There's a number of things that we're able to light up more efficiently. A number of the actual fixtures or products have come down in size considerably, but they still, you know, pack the punch that we need to deliver to get the results our guys are looking for, the professionals who are installing them alongside with their clients. And then another key feature I feel is LED operates in extremely cold or hot conditions. And so with the element changes that we see all over the country, you know, frost and freeze overs along with high heats in the desert, effectively those products are going to be able to be maintained longer and last a lot longer. And then as far as from an eco-friendly standpoint, I've gone to a few symposiums recently, and they've actually calculated out some of the use times in LED over just standard lamps and even LED bulbs when they're looking at integrated LED or built-in LED, where it's actually contained within the fixture and then it has engines and drivers that are completely sealed inside. So the difference between kind of those three, in the sense that if we just take it from the standpoint of an integrated product, number one, there's no toxic material in LED. So we're not putting anything that's evil into the landscapes. And then 100% recyclable. So that's pretty impressive on a product side for us versus kind of what we had to throw away initially when you're looking at lamp-based, if you couldn't get them back into a recycled situation. And then we're reducing our carbon footprint, excuse me. And it's by 1/3 to half in just carbon footprint alone. And then just one integrated LED fixture can cycle or save the actual construction in cycle of 35 incandescent lamps. And then alongside with that, because they're not exposed directly to the elements like lamps are, those products are able to, you know, run a duration that's even at higher percentages of operation. So they can run up to 80% even after their rated cycle lives of like 90,000 hours, which is considerably more than what we used to get from halogen. Some of those, I remember they were down in 10 and 15,000. And then zero UV emissions. So where we're getting a lot of concerns recently, especially from plant symposiums and groups, they don't want fixtures that derive heat or put out UV and have stunted growth or affecting the growth of actual plants. Alongside with that, the UV on our LED products currently is safe enough that they can be used in situations like even in archaeology or on art, because it doesn't affect, you know, or actually have those dim or fade away that you especially wouldn't want in great works of art. So especially outside when we're trying to create our artistry, there's a big plus there for us also in performance. And with that, Nick, I want to see if you have something to add to this conversation.
I do, and it's a little bit simpler. Both Chuck, you and Todd have touched on it. From a contractor's perspective, the installation and design process with the flexibility that LED allows has created this forgiving process and really simplified our job. You know, with LEDs, they're a huge selling point in themselves. Lower profile, they're more energy efficient, and they're longer lasting. So we're able to construct these lighting systems on top of the work that we also do as landscapers to bring to life not only during the day but at night. And that's huge to create two different environments, two scenes for the client to look at. So.
Kyle, do you have anything to add to what Nick has said there?
I think all three of you guys nailed it. There's nothing else for me to add besides rambling. So
10-4.
Okay, great. Well, you all had just amazing things to say about the benefits of LED technologies. So with that, I guess, what other solutions help optimize landscape lighting performance? Chuck, why don't you lead off this time?
Well, with the new technology that's available currently, some of the most impressive results are starting to transpire in the industry. And one of the biggest difference makers are fixtures that are integrated, like we discussed briefly before, but alongside with that, fixtures that you're able to adjust the beam spread, the wattage, and some of them the actual color temperature right on the fixture. So with that being said, I'll just hold this up and you're able to adjust the beam spreads right here. You're able to adjust the wattage in the back. And I know Kyle and Nick have used some of these products in a number of their designs. But that allows you to kind of take control of your design and have the freedom to feel like there's no real mistakes that you can make. You can come in and you can specify fixtures where you know you're going to need an uplight, but you don't necessarily know the beam spread. It also accounts for plant growth or material changes or even on-site changes where you ordered the lights and the hardscape has changed. You have options with those products. And then you can even involve the homeowner. So they're able to go out and make those adjustments as well and experience the lighting in kind of a different format, kind of creating their own artistry alongside with what you created for them. It makes them feel comfortable in the sense where they can come in and add to the project as well. And then I wanted to make one other point is that when you come back in on a site, you always want to leave that room. But I feel from a design standpoint with these fixtures, what it also allows you to do is it allows you to move them around later on. So if you choose that you're going to either plants have died or just haven't progressed the way they should, or you made a change, you can still utilize those products. So we're not putting products out again and again in that cycle like we talked about on the eco side. And with that, Todd, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, well, so when we're talking about optimizing, landscape lighting performance, one of the things that I always comes to mind for me is, and I get asked this a lot, how long will the product last? And if you look in our catalog or some of the other, manufacturers' catalogs, when you're talking about an integrated LED product or even a lamp, there'll be a useful life, or it's called L70, but some of our fixtures will have a 60,000 or 70,000 or 45,000 but rating, and what that means is 60,000 hours is very common for us. And what that means is that fixture, after it's been on for 60,000 hours, it's going to still be displacing 70% of the light output it did on day one. So our LED product, along with everybody else out there that's making LED, that fixture comes on for the very first time. And every time it comes on, it'll be a little bit dimmer every single time. So it's never as bright as the first day you see it. And it takes a long time, though, to get to this 70% mark. It's if you have your lighting system on 5 hours every evening, you could run it for 20 years and you'd be about halfway to the 60,000 hours. So you think about that, that's a long time. And people back when we were talking about LED years ago, they'd say, well, I don't like the fact that it's not going to be as bright as it was, when it first came out, but it's something that you never notice. I mean, it's just, my lighting system's been in, 15 years, and you don't see it to the naked eye. I often refer to it as, people get up in the morning, we're going to get up tomorrow morning, we're going to look in the mirror, we're not going to think we look older than we did, the day before. But if you looked at a picture, 10, 15 years ago of yourself, you'd probably say, yeah, I look older than I did 10, 15 years ago. But it's kind of the same principle, if you will, these very, very gradual decline in the light output. But so the lifespan is just tremendous, and it's a great thing, because when you're talking about optimizing landscape lighting systems, I mean, this is a great thing, because you're going to put this out there and you're not going to be dealing with the idea of replacing lamps as you go. The product quality also it has increased over the years. I mean, again, back, I hate to keep reflecting back to yesteryear, but the quality of a lot of manufacturers has gone up. The products being used with marine grade, brass and corrosion resistant aluminum and high grade stainless steel. They're given the fixtures a much longer life out there. And Chuck briefly talked about heat, and one of the greatest things about these LED fixtures is they don't get screaming hot like a halogen fixture would. I mean, Chuck was talking about plant safety. Well, I mean, I'll take it a step further. I mean, if you're a human and you were to walk up and grab a halogen accent light that was, on for, I mean, it doesn't have to be on very long, 15 minutes. I mean, you're gonna potentially remove your fingerprints from your hand because it's gonna hurt and it burns. So again, when these systems are being put in homeowners' backyards, and I mean generally there's kids running around, pets running around, I mean you got a huge safety factor with the LED product right there. So yeah, I think that's about all I would have to say on that right there.
Wonderful. Well, what tips will help enhance installation techniques? Nick, care to give your thoughts?
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, one of the most important things when interacting with your client is understanding what their long-term goals are and what they are looking to achieve. We have a little bit of a saying around here, give the client what they need, not what they want. And what we mean by that is they are expressing to you what they want to see, but not everyone knows exactly what they're talking about, especially when it comes to lights. So it's on us to explain to them what our thought process is and how we plan on satisfying that want, satisfying that need throughout the process. And with that, I think creating a master plan helps lay out your fixtures, your lines, and anywhere you might run into issues. Creating site maps not only helps with the initial installation, but with maintenance later on too. So I think a master plan, as well as understanding what the client wants to achieve, are crucial. And with that master plan for future expansion. I think customers' biggest regret when it comes to lighting is they did not put enough. And we come across that quite a bit. So running larger gauge lines rather than doing a 12 gauge line, do a 10 gauge line so you can add a couple more fixtures in. Split the line loads up. Todd, you said daisy chains. We still try to avoid them as best we can, just because we like to think we're going to add on to them later. And then with that, transformer locations, planning where there's power, where we're getting it from the house, and where we plan to deliver light to. So minimize your waste when it comes to wiring, and while still nailing the location of the light fixture. And speaking of light fixtures, premium quality material is essential for a premium quality installation. Don't go short anywhere along the way. Whether it's your wire connectors, RLM specifically likes to use LV9500s. So they're a silicone interior waterproofing connector, very strong. I think myself and a foreman and I tried ripping them apart, pulling at each other's ends like tug of war, and we still couldn't get those things to pop. Don't skip on your lighting wire, and then above all else, your lighting fixture. It's important to nail down a quality light fixture. And with that, I think Kyle's got a couple things he would like to add as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another thing is knowing your products very well. So not so much diving so into detail with the photometrics, but knowing it enough to where you can play with it while you're on site, while you're installing it, knowing what sort of beam spread that you're going to have, knowing what sort of light output that you're going to have. And then that also helps when you go into any meeting with a client or a potential client. Helps give you an advantage knowing exactly what you're talking about, knowing what's going in the ground. Another thing that we like to use at RLM is astronomical or smart timers. or transformers. And that convenience of not having, you know, a little $15 plug with the little pins that you see for, you know, 15, 20 years ago, everything can be GPS located now. So having that instantly turn on when the sun goes down and then instantly turn off when the sun comes back up, it just helps enhance your experience or your client's experience with that landscape lighting system. So with that, I want to pass that over to Chuck or Todd, see if you guys have anything else to add.
So I just have two simple things to add. And when I meet with, customers like you, kind of all throughout the West, I always tell them to own their installs and ID their installs. So by what I mean by owning your install is you should put your contact information right on the inside of the actual transformer. Some guys have opted to use a sticker, and they'll go ahead and put that in with their contact number and their phone. So if anything were to ever happen on the system or someone wants to reach you back, it's readily available. And then also by owning your system, that mapping that Nick was talking about, they'll create a simple map like this, and they'll also put it in their jacket, and they'll fold it up. So I mean by the customer's jacket at your office, and you'll fold one of these up and you'll go ahead and put it in either as simple as a zip bag and then put it inside or a jacket. And I've had guys make like a simple envelope feature where they'll drop that inside for the customer to reference. And then by IDing your installs, there's a really simple method that works with the mapping system as well. And that method is the motocross zip tie method. And so I tell customers to take a motocross zip tie and simply take a color code of what they want to use at the actual eyelet of the stake in the fixture. So if it's going to be a yellow line run, each of the fixtures will get a zip tie, and you can cut it off right where you'd like it to be so it doesn't protrude. Down the line, you'd have that yellow run, and then initially right back at the transformer where you're going to put this up inside, you'd have that yellow line run. Now, when Nick spoke about, hey, I want to be able to go back, and if there's an issue, I want to service the system, or if I want to add fixtures to that system. And then on your mapping, if you're smart enough to code in there what your VAs and your wattage are on those individual runs, it makes it a lot quicker to come back in and go ahead and update your design or fix a situation. Hey, there's this double cut on a wire out here when we know it's isolated. We don't have to go through every single tap on the transformer to figure that out. And so, Todd, those are my two quick tips. What do you got?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, everybody on this call, I think, understands that WAC Landscape Lighting doesn't, we're not installers. We're not out there every day putting product in the ground. But my job and, the job of all the salespeople in our company is to go out and talk to the end user, the designers, the contractors that are actually doing the work, and find ways that we can help in a bigger way. I like to think of ourselves as problem solvers. And if we go out and ask questions and find out, what products can we bring to the market that are solving a real problem that is being seen in the field, I think everybody wins. And that is how we, jumped into this industry not very long ago. I'll call it 8 years, and we've come a long way in a short period of time. But it's because of talking to people, asking the right questions, and finding out, hey, what is it that we could bring to the market that would solve a problem that to make everyone's life a little bit easier. So just with that, I just like to wrap up and pass it back to Kim.
Great, wonderful insight, gentlemen. Just a reminder to everyone listening, go ahead and get your questions in the Q&A box, and we will start answering some of those toward the end. But next, let's talk about how do you create a layered lighting experience for your clients? Kyle, why don't you start?
Absolutely. So with this, I'd like to share some pictures of some lighting installations that we've done. I think seeing pictures is always very helpful when we're talking about something like this. And so I kind of want to walk through this picture and just show everyone what a layered lighting experience looks like. So from this perspective, which is coming down their walkway from their driveway, you see a lot of backdrop lighting where you have large mature trees setting the stage for what is to come. And then in these areas, we like to accent the work that we've done, whether it be the outdoor kitchen that's over here, these seat walls, accenting that, because that's always a very big part of what the client is paying for, whether you're the one who's installing it or someone else who's installed it. Another thing that we like to do is use different color lighting. So we didn't put the pool lighting in, but we had a influence on the pool lighting and wanted to bring in some color into this landscape and make it a different scene at night. So there's a few other things in here that are important where you accent important plants, or showpiece plants is what we like to call them. So this pine that's over here, the Japanese maple, giving people things to look at while they're sitting outside at night that they would typically look at during the day, but giving them just a different perspective on their landscape. And then in another picture here, using certain fixtures in a different way than you typically would. So we hung some of these fixtures from the trees to give a little bit of moonlighting, and then layering that down with, you know, your pathway lights that accent the pathway and not make a imbalance for the landscape. Everything here is very balanced between the home, the backdrop lighting, and where people are going to spend most of their time. A lot of things are, again, accented in this picture with this statue that's right here. And every client is always a little bit different on what they want in terms of their lighting system. So you can show them layering that you've done, and the landscape's always going to be different. So you're going to have to layer differently, whether it be accenting the house as your main backdrop or your main backdrop plants, but making sure to use certain fixtures such as uplighting and wall wash lighting to really give you that same effect if you don't have the landscape that I've shown in these two pictures. With that, I want to pass it over to Nick, see if he has anything else to add.
And Kyle touched on a couple things. I do want to say that we have experimented. WC offers a ton of different product options, but we've come across a few situations where we just can't seem to find the right product for the right job. And where I'm going with this is experiment with your fixtures, orienting them in ways you normally wouldn't, or using a pathway light as like a wall wash. In the particular instance I'm thinking of, there is a linear pathway light that typically you would use to illuminate across paths or hardscape features. And the profile, the adjustability allowed it to act as almost a mini wall wash. And it provided just the right amount of light that we were looking for to cast some shadows off a retaining wall that we had done. So don't be closed-minded to what these fixtures can do. Play around with it. You have to, of course, know your audience, know your client, and make sure that's okay before you start experimenting. But have an open mind when it comes to playing with your fixtures. And then, as always, don't just stop with standard warm colors, 2700K through 3000. I would say incorporating lighting, colored lighting, I should say, is a huge selling point nowadays too, especially when it comes around the holidays. People want to create a different environment, set a different scene based on times of the year. So don't be afraid to try and upsell some colored lights on top of the fixtures that you're already putting in. That's short and sweet from me. Chuck, Todd, do you guys have anything to add to that?
I think from a design standpoint, especially when I'm out with the contractor and his client, or it's just the contractor and I look for them. I look for a low, mid, and a high level of light at first that we can add in. So, you know, path lighting and downlighting can be considered those levels. And then we want good transitions of lights so that when we build that overall picture, everything does look balanced, just like Kyle was referring to. I mean, those were beautiful shots you guys put together, and I'm sure those clients were more than happy. I'm sure you structured them where they can, have different on and off settings, and basically different even settings for parties and featured areas, or just when it's quiet time around the house. I think that lighting moments need to happen between frames. So I always look for things that will be a frame. So a pool can be a frame and can be an image where you saw some of the reflections coming off your pool. And that's a moving image in that landscape picture. And with height, we want to pick up and create those frames from window areas. So we pay attention to where people are sitting inside, or where they congregate, or how they move through the project. And when I saw the transitions happening in some of those shots that Kyle put up, were some of the lights that they used on the hardscape, and they just didn't put them all up, or they just didn't put them all down. So when we had path lights along those areas, or we had up lights, there was some transitions in between happening with some down lighting. So you had a smooth feel versus just everything lit one way. And I think one of the biggest factors that we all want to pay attention to is that, a professional job has a pricing that professionals earn. You can go out and place lights in straight rows everywhere on everybody's house and leave as quickly as possible. But a professional will go in and do exactly, what Nick was referring to, is he'll come in and he's willing to experiment, do the adjustments, get things right, climb the roof, do the gables, whatever it takes for that client to immediately hit the point where they say, that's it, that's exactly what I want. And being able to understand the fixtures and how they relate in that sense. Do I need 2 here on this, or do I need 1, or do I need 3? Do I need to show 3 dimensions, or do I need to bring the shadows up and then furl up these specimens? So that might take 2. So I think that, great landscape lighting installers think in those terms, and they're willing to bend the rules like you guys do, at every turn, to make sure the client gets 100% of what they're looking for, and even what they're not expecting. So, Todd?
Yeah, awesome input by everyone there on this subject of, layering the light. And when we speak about it just generally, it's kind of like at first pass, it's just, different levels of light on the project. And from a product perspective, I think we've really hit a home run with some of the fixtures that we have in our lineup, where we have this onboard adjustment where you can just take a screwdriver. I know Chuck showed a fixture earlier, but it's very, very simple to do on our, WAC fixtures here, where you're just taking the screwdriver and you're dialing this up or down within a huge range. And we're not the only ones that have that technology to, change light levels, but we have it in a very, very simple way at the exterior of the fixture by just turning a dial. So we're very proud of that. And I think that helps, and, Nick mentioned, playing with the fixtures on the job. And I think you're allowing yourself some flexibility with your designs by using an adjustable fixture.
Great. Okay. Well, what are some of the benefits of working with a vertically integrated manufacturer? Todd, let's start back with you.
Okay, so I've worked for companies that, WAC is a vertically integrated company, and I've worked for other companies that are not vertically integrated, but there are some advantages for certain, and I'll touch on a few, and I'll pass it off to Chuck. But one of the things is you have complete control over the manufacturing process. So when things go into the production process, and many things can happen, but there's no reason for anybody in a vertically integrated company to cut any corners. I mean, everybody is on board as a paid employee. This is not getting subbed out or farmed out to a third party who's making products for WAC landscape lighting. So that's a huge benefit. So we're not the only landscape lighting manufacturer that would be vertically integrated, but I do like our position, and if we need to make changes, we can do those on the fly. So we have that agility to say, hey, we figured out a way to make something better, or to change something that's not performing like it should. Another huge advantage that we can do, and we're not scheduling time and having to go back to a manufacturer that is possibly, you know, we've scheduled a window of time where we got to go in and find another window so we can make the change. We can just do that, you know, kind of as an ongoing, you know, process, which is a very, very big thing. Then the obvious thing is production costs. We are not, again, taking this and out to a third party, having it made, and then paying a markup and then marking it up again, selling it, you know, a third time. So we have some advantages that are, I think, very nice, and we're very proud of how that process flows. And yeah, with that, I pass it over to Chuck.
Thanks, Todd. I think what's really impressive to me is that it's literally one team, one product. And that's what I see in a vertically integrated manufacturer, is that you actually, everybody who touches that has a part in that. And that's shared throughout the entire company. So from inception all the way through the product that's delivered, everybody's gone through that for our client over and over again. And there's, and I shouldn't say, I'm sure there's other manufacturers that have that desire as well. So, but just taking it from the standpoint of what that means to the customer, I think that, you know, they take ownership of everything that they do or put in if they really care about that. And that's big for us. And then I think just consistency of the product, what's coming out of there, and how it's been developed, how it's been designed, the considerations, taking the customer's aspects into consideration and taking those in on a first-hand basis versus trying to decipher them through a chain to get a product that you want. So that definitely for turnaround and for development. So for future products that are coming out the door, there's a huge benefit for the customer. And then there's no skimp at any standpoint. So if we have that innovation, or if that innovation exists in LED, it's being developed into that product as quickly as possible, and even, you know, sent out at those rates to kind of even develop and change our industry faster and further. And then with the process of MTO, or made to order, that puts the product in the hands of everybody directly from manufacturing points that are directly here in the States. So on an MTO basis, we're not running short on product at any given point. We're not waiting on anything. Those products are being produced and sent out. And I think Nick and Kyle can definitely speak to the advantages of being able to move through a project timely, deliver for the client, and then, you know, receive their compensation and deliver to their personnel. It's just a chain that needs to happen in order for the industry to continue to be successful. I think it's very important. So those are the advantages I see. How about you, Kyle and Nick?
Yeah, I see from a contractor perspective, we're very busy all the time. I know everyone's very busy, but we're moving from place to place to place. And after working with Todd for a few years now, you know, having the ability to just send him a quick email about availability on, you know, certain products, and he doesn't have to go to a manufacturer that he doesn't know. He goes to someone who's right there in his company and can get me that answer very quickly. And then I can turn around and give that answer right to my client and provide that speed and efficiency that everyone really wants to provide to their customers. I think Nick will probably have a little bit more to say from a contractor perspective, but that is the biggest thing that I've seen.
And I think some of it too is we feel brought into the manufacturing process. You know, for example, Todd and Adam both came down to our shop and we talked about what's working, what's not, and we were allowed to give our input and basically tell them, hey, I think this is the direction you guys need to go. And we feel like our voice is being heard, which in turn, you know, delivers the client, the customer, you know, a final product that is unbeatable. So I think just being able to talk and feel a part of that process is what makes vertically integrated manufacturers such a special thing.
Great. Okay, well, let's shift gears a little bit and get to some viewer questions. So Nate says, very happy that we are discussing the energy efficiency of these tools. How can we increase general awareness of the benefits of energy efficient models, regardless of client budgets? Anyone want to take that one?
I can start. You know, I think the LED movement, if you will, it transcends far beyond just landscape lighting. I mean, there's many homeowners that I talk to, neighbors, what have you, that are converting their entire house from standard light bulbs to LED. They understand that there's a savings. I think the awareness is rising every year out there, and it's a growing movement, but it is still pretty young. I mean, there's many people that were scared of LEDs in the beginning. They thought they had a weird color, and some of them did, but nowadays the LED products that are being made are better than ever, and it's hard to tell. If you buy the right product, you could put it in a table lamp inside your home. I don't think anybody would ever know that it's LED or if it's an incandescent lamp.
Anyone else want to weigh in on how you go about promoting the energy efficiency?
So in working with a number of contractors who do a number of HOAs or properties that are taken care of, and they have a large number of lights out there. And comparatively speaking, just from a standpoint of energy to speak as one, and then maintenance to speak on the other side. But from an energy standpoint, you can always come back in and calculate what the differences are, even on current LED that they may have there in the format of larger fixtures that are just kind of all line voltage, because the performance in low voltage now in some of the products can mirror that line voltage. So number one, you're creating safety, but number two, you're also bringing down the number of diodes and the number of watts and VA at each of those fixtures. And there's a simple calculation that you can run through and do. Obviously, you need to know the kilowatt per hour charges within that area. And so you generally just take that and add up the consumption, and then you want to go ahead and multiply it times the hours run, and then by their rate, you're going to be able to see the charges. And I've done multiple comparisons with customers, contractors who are installing, and then presentations at HOAs where they see the difference. And effectively, what always comes in, even to top the costs. Like, for example, I'll just use one HOA. They came in and said, hey, within 10 years, it's going to pay to replace almost over 200 fixtures. We're going to be paid back just from the standpoint of energy. But then they take a look and they come back in and look at the maintenance that they've been paying, because they've had someone coming in and touching the individual fixtures to repair them or relamp them in some situations. And that costs them, $200 to $700 a visit, and they're multiplying that. So the efficiency even comes up. But those are the things you want to look to and bring up with your clients. And then if you can, factor in those ROI dates for them, it definitely gets their attention.
Excellent. Okay, well, Nick, Ron would like to know, could you reiterate what connectors you mentioned earlier on?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and type that answer, but those are Blazing LV 9500 waterproof connectors. So I'll type that in there as well.
Wonderful. And Kyle, we have one for you too. Kathy would like to know, how did you light up the red buds in the photo you showed?
Yeah, so those were exactly like she mentioned in another post there. It was just a couple of the 35 watt up accent lights, one on each tree. And with that adjustability, like Todd was talking about earlier, we were able to, start it off relatively low and then crank that up up to the client's perspective and what they wanted.
Kyle, did you use 30K on those?
What was that?
Did you use 3000K? Did you use 30K on those?
I believe we did.
'Cause they were
Nick was there
pretty
on the install, and he would know a little bit more into detail.
Unfortunately, I don't remember that part of it.
I mean, they did look awesome. So, I mean, it felt like to me like those like stood out. They just popped. And at 30K, I think that would just get that crispness of those pinks and reds and just really create that effect.
Okay, let's move on. So Ron also wants to know, with the adjustable fixtures, how often do you change the adjustments later on? Are they more expensive than fixed fixtures?
So those adjustable fixtures, I always adjust them once right as we put them in. So what I do is I put them in during the daytime and then go back out there myself, or myself and another foreman of ours, and we go out there and we adjust those maybe one time, maybe two times while we were there on site on the initial. And then usually we do the continual maintenance on these properties. So, and it only ever comes up once the client notices something or when our foreman notices something. So depending on where you put the light. So if you put it on, say, like a river birch tree that grows very, very quickly, you're going to adjust that every 2 years, every 3 years, somewhere in there, depending on the initial height of that tree. But in certain instances where you're accenting, say, the stonework on a house, you only ever adjust that the one time, that first night that you're out there.
Okay, here's a good question. Any tips on how to better photograph lighting projects?
Oh, so this is kind of loaded from our end. We actually have a gal in our office who is also a part-time photographer. So she's got the professional side of things handled. I would say looking toward professional pictures, like the pool picture that Kyle showed was actually by a professional photographer as well. So once you find that sweet spot, you find that project, you look back at it and you did a great job. Not to say that the rest of the jobs weren't great, but it's truly something spectacular. I would look at professional photography and using that as fuel for social media, especially nowadays. That's an important part of that process. Hopefully that answers your question.
I think
Yeah, I believe there's seminars in our industry that are just focused just around nighttime photography, and I know that they take place, and I know folks that go to those because they want to do their own photography on their own jobs. But that's something that generally would be promoted at the distributor level often, and so something maybe just to keep an eye out for.
Great point.
When it comes to photography, I think that the one thing that's always stood out for me is that when we were out on site and I was participating in night shots and readjusting and then adding in some additional fixtures, there was a certain time, and I know, there's always different opinions on what time is the best time. But normally it was always usually 20 to 30 minutes before it became completely dark was the time that they were trying to catch. So we would literally stand around waiting. We said, what we're waiting for. And then they would start what we thought was early. We said, hey, this is kind of early to be starting. It isn't even dark yet. And they said, oh no, this is the time. And these are going to be the best statement photos. And they did come out at that best time. So I'm sure someone can research that to what that time is based on their time zone. But there are certain times you do want to take photos.
Great advice. Another question from Nate is, lighting makes a landscape, but how much is too much? He said, I know you said that clients regularly say, I wish I put in more, but we're not trying to make a landing strip here, right?
No, and I don't think a landing strip is the goal out the gate anyway. I would like to circle back to that master plan I had discussed. With that master plan, you're looking at what hardscape features, what softscape features, specimen plants, and areas, like for example, pathway lights, you do want lighting. So I would say start where you're going to need fixtures based on your design and what the client's landscape looks like, what the house looks like, the hardscape. And then the more you use these fixtures, the more you get a feel for what kind of light they project. And then on top of that, you do have the adjustability. and kind of filling in the space slowly but gradually. But the biggest part in all of that is customer feedback, because you might not want a landing strip, but maybe they do. And I've come across a couple clients of ours that more is never enough, and they keep going and going and going. And when there's just 0 dark spots in the landscape, that's when you've hit the spot. So I think a lot of it is communication back and forth on what the client is looking for and what you are trying to solve for them.
Okay. Well, here's a good big picture question for all of you. Over the past 10 years, what would you say has been the most innovative idea or product within the landscape lighting space?
I'll jump in on that to start. I believe it's been, and it might sound self-serving here, but I'm going to say it's the adjustability of the LED fixtures that are being produced. I mean, WAC was the first to come out with it, but now it is sort of a movement in the industry, and there's a lot of companies that are coming out with a way to adjust, whether it's brightness or beam control. It's just become a very big movement, and in my opinion, if LED is the biggest change over the past 10 years, I mean, the adjustable LED fixtures would definitely fall in right behind that. Chuck, what do you say?
I agree with that, Todd, and I think that the next big leap for us is going to be how to control, how to control the fixtures, how to deliver a better transformer and control experience. I mean, we've all been kind of pecking around the edges at it, but I think that in this next year, there's going to be a lot of solutions that come out that are going to be effective, and they're going to operate, at a more seamless rate than kind of what they've been. We've kind of all been in and around that area and want the customer to have that experience, but in a professional's hands, it's even cumbersome at times, or there's a learning curve for you guys to come in and be able to operate those systems, let alone hand it to somebody that's really unfamiliar and have them take control of their own. And I think that's the next big leap. And I think we've all got to get there. And I know, we're working on ours, and I'm sure others are working on theirs. But in my experience, we've kind of got a little head start on our innovation side.
And there is one item I want to talk about in particular. It plays off the adjustability and the flexibility in fixtures, but it's specifically about the hardscape coping light. I don't know of any other brand other than WAC that actually has allowed the light itself to be detached from the mount. So from a contractor's perspective, who also does hardscape, it adds serviceability while being cost effective to swapping out lights that do fail. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that is something awesome that we never really thought we'd see, but we did.
Great insight, gentlemen. Another viewer question just popped up. How do you feel about motion sensor for landscape lighting?
I like the security of it. It does help with security. And I've seen it especially on gables on homes around side doors or garage doors. It is nice until you get a wild animal that runs out and shocks you that, it turned that light on. So from a security standpoint, they're very nice. But from a interactive client standpoint, it may put some people off.
Todd, Chuck, anything to add on motion sensor lighting?
No, I mean, I would say I get asked about motion sensors less than a handful of times in an entire year. We don't have one that for landscape lighting that we are manufacturing, and I think it's because we just don't get asked for it often enough. Chuck, I don't know if that falls with what you see.
So what the companies that do put those in at times on motion, sometimes it's a little bit difficult or challenging to find a motion sensor that'll work on the 12-volt side of the transformer. So you're relegated to, running a line voltage and then trying to deliver that alongside with the operation. So it's almost an interrupt through the entire transformer. And that kind of puts people off, especially, even electricians, because they feel that, you know, the reliability of that delivering through the other side of the device. And I don't see it that way in that sense, but again, like Todd mentioned, it's very limited times that I have, most people, you know, whether it's a positive or negative, they're staggering their lighting based on how their lifestyle is. So, hey, I've got coyotes and I'm in California, Arizona, wherever you are. Hey, I've got coyotes coming up my back hill all the time. They'll cycle those lights. So they'll run them and they'll set them up to run with the entire system, and it'll show off the canyon down below. And then when there's a certain time at night that they know that activity ramps up, hey, at 2:30 my lights come on and they go off at 3:30 down in the canyon. And then in the morning when I get up, they go back on at 4:30 and they go back off at 5:30 when I'm leaving the door, just so I feel good about not having that situation or my animals out at that time of the day. So, you know, to answer that, it's a handful of times, but if you need it and you need help with it, you know, there's always answers and we'll help you find them.
Great. Okay. Well, one last question, if a few of you want to weigh in on this. How do you know when to replace LED landscape lighting fixtures?
I'll start with that. I talked on it a little bit earlier. Each of the fixtures that are produced, and I think it's by any manufacturer, it's not specific, you know, there is a rating and a useful life rating. And when it gets to 70% of its original output, we say that is time to think about replacing it. Now, you might say, hey, it looks perfectly fine, but my understanding is after it gets to the 70% output level, it's going to degrade slightly faster than it did that first 30%. So there is a time where, you know, we would say, hey, the fixture has served its useful life, and it's time to start considering, you know, replacing that fixture.
The main time when I see people want to replace the fixture is it's usually their pathway lighting, and it's because it's gone out of style, which happens well before that L70 number that Todd was talking about. So sure, you have the mechanicals of it with that LED lighting, but then you also have styles, and there's a lot of innovation in styles with the fixtures themselves. And that's where I've seen most of the changes coming from.
Okay. And I guess Chuck, Todd, Ron wants to know, can I contact you with fixture ideas? You might have the next big thing in mind. How can he go about contacting you guys?
100% he can contact us. Yes, for sure.
Well,
Wonderful.
anyone can contact me, and they can contact me for that content, or even, you know, design assistance. I'll help with any of that if you have any questions or value that from me. And then alongside with that, we do layout design and run sizing to help our customers with project. I can also make suggestions on, you know, which fixtures will create which effects to kind of get you there.
Okay.
Kim, do we have a way to put out our email addresses to the folks that are on the webinar today?
Yep, we will make sure to do that. It'll be in the email they receive with the finished webinar. You can also put that online. Real quick, one more viewer question came in. I'll ask you guys if you just want to give a quick answer to before we wrap up. Any trend in timer technology that customers are demanding?
Astronomical and GPS. That is the biggest one that we always hear.
Above a 300-watt transformer size.
Okay.
Got it. Well, thank you to our panelists today. You were all very insightful. And thank you for listening to today's webinar. Like we've mentioned several times, a copy of this will go to everybody who is registered in 1 to 3 days, and it will also be online on our website. So thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank
Very
you.
nice.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Kim.